as a human, for every click of a button that you have in your test, which is thousands, you can't remember, oh, wait a second, I use this property, but I'm going to change it, so I need it. You can't remember all those things. For a computer, that's like,
Oren, Rubin, thank you so much for joining me on 20 Minute Leaders. It's been a while, but I'm so glad that I finally caught you. How are you?
indeed, doing great, my friend. How about you?
Doing fantastic. You were so kind and gracious to invite me to a wonderful dinner a few months ago. I don't know if you remember, but you brought a great focus group. We talked about testing, we talked about research and development, and we talked about the struggles of building beautiful products. And it was very inspiring for me. So thank you for the invitation for that.
You're welcome, my friend. Any chance to see is great.
I love it. Oren, you have a beautiful journey from IBM to Wix to Applitools to now Testim.io with a lot of things in between that I didn't even mention. But it doesn't do justice to the core of your journey. Tell me a little bit about yourself and how do you even get involved with testing?
Well, first of all, notice that it goes from bigger companies to smaller. Like IBM is 300. I was employee 330. Cadence, that was employee number 5,000. Wix, that was 151. Applitools, that was employee number one. And with Testim, that's employee number zero. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so that's a beautiful funnel, and slowly through that funnel, you're getting closer and closer to this idea of quality and architecture, right?
I think quality was always there in the around me. Like for example, at IBM, things needs to be tested. I love doing that and actually making sure when you as an engineer you want to deliver a product, you want to make sure that it's high quality. Of course, you want to with and also helping with the tools. As a young engineer, it's like I love those. Actually, so later with Cadence, um, I was a compiler engineer. There's a language. There's two languages that were developed in Israel. So I was glad to be working on one of them. But the nice part is it was a language for hardware verification. So that means my users, as they say, were people that are testers. So to understand what they are doing, you need to understand a little bit about test automation, or in this case, hardware automation.
Wow.
So I always had this thing in the background, and even then, when I went to Wix, of course, I did some side project, and that's how Wix got to me and said, "Hey, we're moving from this thing from Flash to HTML. Come and help us build this product." And everything was tested manually. As a person that came that saw that everything was tested automatically and even had a special language for that, I was like, what? No, no, no way are we going at Wix to do that manually. So then you start pushing in a company, which a company already has a few hundred people. It's like it's not that simple to make the change. But luckily, amazing founders, and I work closely with Nadav Rami and Yoav Avrami. More on the more technical side, I was for everyone who didn't get that, I'm an engineer that turned into the dark side of product and business. But back then at Wix, I saw the challenge already, and how to change a company and how to make it from only manual testing for to be full CI/CD.
What was the most difficult journey of taking a company of a few hundred developers, hundreds of thousands or potentially millions of lines of code, and now slowly transitioning to automatic testing? I know how difficult it is to do it when you have zero lines of code, but how difficult is it to do it when you have a lot of lines of code?
So so I think in Wix it was a little bit easier because were just building a new product, so that made
Okay,
it easier. But you need to convince people of actually that
right.
the way of thinking should be different. And you need to find out who are the people that can move something inside an organization. It's always like that. It's whether that's in the technical side or not. But you need to understand who are kind of like the champions, who are the people that you need to get them excited one by one, get them excited, and eventually you'll have the majority of people that are rooting for that and will start pushing toward that and will make the change.
Okay, so Oren,
And
I have a challenge for you. Are you ready?
yes,
I want you to get me excited about testing. Get
first of all,
people
it's easy
excited.
because where you work, they already use Testim. Are you testing about? Wait a second. Are you talking about test automation or Testim.io? Testim.
Let's start with
So
this idea of why testing is even important.
well, you always test. You don't even know about it, but you always test. The question is when. The question is who's testing it. Are you testing it or are your users? So
Ah,
bugs. So bugs hurt your business, and it depends on the company that it hurts you in a different way. And some bugs like Intel had that costed $4 billion, and the branding,
right, right.
wow.
I
And
remember
there's a
that.
few. Oh yeah, not to mention spaceships that exploded, dude. It's critical to make sure that you're testing, you're making sure that your product does exactly what you want. So some companies, very few, like Netflix, can say, wait a second, if something doesn't work, you'll come back in 30 minutes. But in a lot of cases, think about the weeks that someone wants to pay now, or PayPal, or anyone that wants to pay something for a product. If doesn't work for the next 30 minutes, they'll go to the competition.
Right,
So you
right.
lose money. So
Okay, so
everything eventually,
I'm convinced that testing is important. But you know, when I started my first few days as a software engineer, I was told that before I deploy my product, I need to write a bunch of manual tests on Jira, follow them manually, and that's enough. Then I'll deploy. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with the ideology that I'll just write some manual tests, I'll repeat them every deployment, and there's nobody better than my own two eyes, right?
mm, so I think there's a few things that actually happened in the last decade. Um, One is that they find out that the earlier you find a bug, the cheaper it is to fix it. So if you
Right.
find it just before production or a month earlier, then it will that's a great improvement in ROI. So that's one thing. The second thing is you actually manually you don't have enough people in the world. Let's just say your repo, there's 100 developers. If you want to run your tests before every pull request, and there's a lot of those,
Yeah.
and you'll need thousands of manual testers that will go and click on stuff, and you can't do that. If you want to, first of all, if you want to go with the paradigm which is called shift left, you need a lot of tests, and that means parallelization. And then don't get there's the environment. You want to run different browsers, different parameters. There's not enough humans in the world, and that's why we go to machines,
So
and they do it much better than us, much better. And you're gonna miss some stuff, and the machine is not gonna miss that,
right.
even without coffee.
I have to say that one of the first time that I used snapshot testing, it was still back in the IDF, and I remember that I was developing this website, and I ran my manual tests, and everything seemed good, and had just started playing around with taking the snapshots through Jest, I believe, and all of a sudden it showed me that a part of the website that I didn't even notice started shifting, and I could only imagine how this could roll and this bug would continue and cost me more and more. Oren, but I have to ask before we get to Testim.io, you go through these companies, you do all sorts of different technologies, and at the end you decide that you're passionate about automatic testing and helping organizations around the world to better test and do it in a more fun and scalable way. Why do you focus on that? Why is that the passion at the end?
I think that it actually started with the second thing of what you said, the latter, which is I wanted to help and say, I love, and so are you. We love to help people, but now we need to understand how can I help, and what is the best thing that I can do to help people, and of course to affect much as more as possible. Because if you work for one company, you help them. If you work at a company, but if you deliver a product that can help thousands of companies, then you feel you can help large scale of the world. So it starts with that, the fact that you want to help, and the fact that you need to understand what can I do best. And I think when I asked about different questions, about talk to before starting testing, I talked to so many VP engineers in Israel and the world. And in Israel, was much easier because everyone is like in a walking distance,
Yeah.
or nowadays Zoom distance. Um, but you find out where are their challenges, what are their pains. That's the most important thing. And it's weird that I know a lot of engineers go to the dog side of the business and we can start a startup. The most important thing that they need to remember, that's someone that someone taught me a few years ago. You start a conversation not by explaining what your product does, is explaining what is the pain of the other person. You never, and everyone keeps saying things that salespeople are sleazy and like, no, it doesn't supposed to be like that. Have a product that answers someone's pain, they'll want to buy it. But usually, a salesperson, sometimes they have struggled to buy it. The salesperson is just to navigate that and make sure that they're going to make it in the most easiest way. It all starts with, hey, you're solving a real challenge.
So how long
So
did it
that
take? So you entered the startup phase very convinced that you're solving a deep problem. You've experienced it yourself. You're talking to a bunch of VP engineers. You're doing your research. What is the solution that you come up with that could solve this problem for a lot of people?
I saw that most people didn't even get started with test
Right,
automation. And there, I've noticed trends. First of all, there's actually a trend. There's one that code is moving to the front end. Like every 10 years, code is moving from the back end to the front end. It was mainframes, then that's the back end. Then it was personal PCs. The code was on the front end. Then the web came along and the servers, and the code again was most of the code was in the back end. Now we notice React, Angular apps. There's like so many of the code, the critical
right.
business logic was moving to the front end and nobody knew how to test it. So everyone I see that there's a channel, everyone says, oh, wait a second. I used to have one line of code in the front end, which I tested manually. Now I have a million of those. How the hell do I test it?
Right.
And of course, test end to end. So we saw the trend. First of all, you see a trend, and you're saying, "Hey, it's going to spike." The testing on the front end is gonna trend, and what are the existing tools? And the existing tools, if you think about that, just understanding a megabyte 15 years ago, last time the front end was in the center, it was so much information, like one gigabyte. It was like, oh my God, it's so huge. The methods, things like AI, didn't exist 20 years ago. Like, think of the change that's been
Right.
since. And then you're thinking, what has changed? And how can I use technology to actually solve something that's needed?
A
So you
hundred
start with
percent.
that.
So you start with that, and so what is the product now that you've been working on for the past few years that I've also had a pleasure of playing around with quite a few times?
So what we saw was we said, wait a second, to help with end-to-end testing, we said one of the biggest challenges was that the UI keeps changing all the time, and all the current
Right.
technologies use one property. You have to say, hey, find this button based on, I don't know, the text. You have to name it. You have to do it yourself, and that's literally I could do it, calling it like almost like doing it manually. And the second thing is that it changes. The application keeps changing, but you can, as a human, for every click of a button that you have in your test, which is thousands, you can't remember. Oh, wait a second, I use this property, but I'm going to change it, so I need it. You can remember all those things. For a computer, that's like no brainer. They can follow, and for every click, you can have thousands of different attributes and features, and you can say, "Oh, I can find it in more ways than a human. Things that a human didn't even think about. I can think of ways to how to find that element." So in here specifically, we took the pain that people had, which is how do I test faster? I want
Right.
to release tomorrow. Why do I need to write a test for a week? I need it in 5 minutes. and the challenge of, in that case, it's called testability or test flakiness, and taking those challenges and saying, hey, how can I have uh, a solution that solves those questions?
Right. And that's so, and that solution becomes Testim.io, based out of San Francisco.
That's the beginning. After that, you see why people come to you, and you talk, and the more customers you have, you understand what exactly they want. You see more challenges, and then you started seeing, hey, I can do more things. I can help them. Then they started saying, hey, there's duplications everywhere. How can I find out? And then you're saying, oh, we can use the same technology to find all the duplications and recommend to you how to use a reusable component. Those things always come with talking to customers, understanding their challenges, because they always ask one feature. You talk to them, you understand what the challenge is, and then you say, hey, here's another feature which is much better.
So, Oren, talk to me a little bit about this feedback cycle, this agile methodology that you're using, of developing a product, watching your users, talking to them, understanding the pain points. Obviously, as somebody who's been doing it for years, as an engineer yourself, you can sympathize very, very well with these pain points. How do you then translate that into a product that doesn't yet exist? Right? Because you're developing products that don't yet exist, you're taking pain points that do exist, and you're creatively finding solutions for them through Testim.io. So how does that process look like?
I think in my case, it helps that I've been in this domain for a long time.
Right.
And first of all, there was a company that was willing to pay even before we had the product.
Wow.
That was, I think, about $60,000 contract, and I showed them sketches. So I think they trusted me because they saw earlier when I worked in Applitools, they saw me building a product from idea to a real product, and I think they trusted. So that's, you need to build that
Right.
trust with the community. But I think it's working very closely with the customers from day zero and ongoing all the time, working with them. You have one thing, and that's in the beginning of a call. Let's just say someone's paying you already. You have one thing that you have to ask them in the beginning. What are your goals? What are your goals? And how can I make you the happiest person in the universe? And then you start thinking, okay, let's do this. By the way, the trick here is that sometimes a person's goals and the company goals, they don't all necessarily all the time align. I think it's very important when you're building a product. It's also uh, you need to start understanding how do they think, what makes them happy, and where do they want to be. And it's funny because it's like everyone asks, where do you want to be in 5 years? You have to know that
Right.
in a 30-minute conversation, and to understand that with that person, where do they want to go and make them happy.
I
So
love
there's
that.
two things. When you said when we were talking about sell, the only thing is trying to understand what people want as the individual. Second thing is what makes the company or the manager, what would make the manager happy.
I love that. Oren, where do you see this going in 5, 10 years? The industry, not necessarily just Testim.io, but this idea of tests first and test driven mentality. What where do you see us going in 10, 15 years in terms of development?
Um, First of all, I think developers, there's always talking about the shift left that developers do testing earlier. I
Right.
think developers will be also the shift right. Developers will be much more connected to what's going on in production all the
Mm,
time. When they see something, when something doesn't work, I think that everything that's going on in production, you'll understand, first of all, what are your users doing right now. When someone's writing tests, they don't even know what's going on in production. That's
right.
crazy. They don't know what
Right.
are, what are the users usually doing. Imagine that you do know what all your users are doing. What are things that you didn't do? If something, a bug happened, then you know exactly what the scenario is automatically. So I think those are, but that's, you'll need 10, 20 years for that. That's going to be much sooner, I think. After that, I think there will be, you will connect more the product level. I think you'll be able to test more or define what the scenarios when you're talking about the product. This is what I want the product to be. Okay, here's my test automatically generated. Those
Right.
would have to come.
I love
But
that.
it's
Oh,
yeah,
Oren,
I think it has to come there. It will be there. Don't worry.
I love that, and I had the pleasure of both developing with testing and without testing, and I can definitely testify that it's a different world. And when building the application, the number of times that I found myself breaking my head against the wall when I didn't do test-driven development, it was awful. So to all my friends at Stanford 8200 that are listening to this. I'm a huge believer both in Testim and Testim.io. And thank you for introducing me to this world. A lot of it is due to the work that you're doing with Testim.io that I got involved more and more and learn about it. So thank you for that. But Oren, before we finish, I need to ask you for the most important question, which is three words that you would use to describe yourself. And I know that
Describe myself.
and I apologize in advance that I did not tell you enough time in advance. So I'm not going to hold you accountable to that.
um, do I have to describe myself in 3 words?
However, you'd like to answer the question.
No. So I'm first of all, I think like a lot of entrepreneurs, I'm a person that loves learning. I love and I think uh, I'm doing what I enjoying myself the most, which is I'm learning every day. Even years, even in the same company, you keep learning it all the time. So I love that. And but things that I think the people don't know about me is that on one hand I play the guitar. He's always played plays the electric guitar,
I love
and
that.
on the other hand, I love rock. And on the other hand, I play chess now every day. But actually, not
Wow.
just regular chess. It's bug house. It's a chess variation, two people versus two people. So it's a little bit more. You have to look at two boards. Um,
Wow.
and it's this is the nice part when it's more it's of course you have to think about 10 moves ahead, and of course there's another board, but there's also communication with other people. so i think um, and I see you like that as well. I can see that it's not just about technology and ideas and about cracking the optimal just solution how to win your opponent. You have a partner, and you need to talk to them and tell them what you need, and you need them to help you out, and you help them, which is I think this is what I love most, and it's that working with people and having that building that all together.
And the next thing I'm going to do right about this is two things. Is first invite you to a game on chess.com, and the next one is looking up this two versus two game because it looks wonderful. Oren, thank you very much. Toda rabah. This was just wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome, my friend.
Take care.